We're going to have a workshop, so to speak, instead of an actual straight presentation. What I'd like to do is start by saying one of the, one of a number of common threads that have gone through member surveys and discussions with members in general, those kinds of things, has been the topic of how to care for, preserve, store your flags. Because many of us have either a collection or a body of flags that are personal. Some of us collect and do that commercially. So what I'd like to do is give you an idea of some very basic storage and conservation / preservation types of things that you can do with your flags. This is not meant to be exhaustive or, hey, now I can go off and do all these kinds of things that Stan talked about. It's simply a starting point that might give you ideas on how to approach storing and preserving your collection, regardless of what reason you have flags. Many of us have flags that we fly every day and they get worn out and they need to be destroyed and those kind of things. And as I mentioned, we have others that are members that actually deal with historic flags as a commercial endeavor, and then we have, of course, everybody in between. So what I'd like to do is run through some things on slides and then show you some things here on the work table. Okay. Just to start off, even your daily flying flags, if it's at all possible, the goal is to have your flag completely open, have it completely flat, and in a controlled, dark environment, okay? That's the goal. Obviously, not always possible, and that's why we're going to talk about the options and things you can do on that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, open means not folded, okay, and not rolled. Okay. A few things that we're going to cover here as far as options, flat storage and rolled, and the differences, and then folded storage. Okay, whatever you do, even your daily flag that's out in front of your house, please don't do this, okay? I found that on the web where guys were saying, hey, sometimes you don't want your flag to blow away. All those kinds of things are obviously important to protect the lifespan of your daily use flags. But cramming it into a tube in your garage does not help even those daily use kinds of flags, okay? The two things we're going to focus on real quick here is time and your flag's enemies. Besides time, because time is also your flag's enemies. Okay, one of your flag's enemies. Okay, in reality, what you need to decide with the flags that you have is how long do you want it to exist? Are these historic or artifacts? Are these family heirlooms? Are the valuable collections, meaning they're worth some money? And that can mean, as I mentioned here, emotional or actual assessed value. As the first slide said, flat storage is always the best. And if you have these types of forever flags and anything other than flat storage, you're already lessening the time that your flag is going to exist. Okay, that's at the bare bones here. Another option we're going to cover besides flat storage is being rolled on a tube. Okay, long term, these are your possible collection piece. Maybe it's your personal collection, and really all you're worried about is making sure that it stays in as pristine as condition or best condition as possible, at least during your lifetime. Okay, and that's where again flat storage is as possible, potentially rolled or folded, and there's different ways to do that so that you can support the flag and ensure that it has a longer lifespan. Okay, and then there are the consumables, meaning your daily use flag, stuff that you fly outside, and then when it's no longer serviceable, you destroy. Okay, it's still a good idea to either roll them or fold them supported, because if you only fly it once a year, you'd be surprised how much damage can happen just taken out once a year. Okay. The best. Now, this is your expensive museum repository for flags. You're talking about a metal cabinet that's got baked on enamel and very shallow drawers that are well supported so that your flag doesn't bend, those kind of things. And then they're covered with typically unbleached muslin or some other lightweight inert material. Okay. This is just another view of those shallow drawers. Again, because they're often large flags involved, these things can be rather large just by themselves, and those drawers are heavy by themselves because you don't want them sagging from their own weight, much less the weight of the flag. And some flags, as you all know, can be very heavy. Okay. Small flags in flat storage. You can have them in just smaller versions of those cabinets. You can have them on a supported base of what we call coroplast, which is like plastic cardboard. It's manufactured, it looks exactly like cardboard, only it's made out of inert material, and or blue board, which looks exactly like regular cardboard, only it's made out of archival materials. And depending on the weight of your flag will determine what that base is. And then you put it either between sheets of unbuffered tissue or in a folded piece that covers the whole thing. And one reason that you want to have a base on there is because you want to handle your flags as little as possible, and having that supported base allows you to pick it up, move it someplace, or do something with it without actually touching it. And I mentioned unbuffered tissue. That's typically the go-to form of protective tissue. Buffered tissue does exist, but you use that typically when your object, your textile or what have you, is off-gassing something that needs to be neutralized. And that buffering in that tissue helps that happen. If you use buffered tissue with something that's not off-gassing, you could actually damage what you're trying to preserve because that buffering in the tissue doesn't have anything to neutralize. So typically the go-to is your unbuffered tissue. Okay. And I'm going to hand out samples, and you guys can come see things that I'll demonstrate to give you an idea that a lot of this sounds cosmic, but it is not. Okay. Okay. Besides flat storage, you've got rolled storage. The bigger your flag, the larger diameter of tube that you want to use. And I'll show you here in just a second a sample of that blue tube. Again, it's a cardboard tube, made just like regular cardboard tubes, typically spiral wound, that's made out of a archival material rather than regular cardboard. Okay, so that's really any sizable flag. The tube supports the flag, and I'll show you here, you layer that tissue in such a way that when you roll the flag, the tissue keeps the flag from touching itself as well as the tube. Okay, and one thing is to remember, regardless of whether it's a flag that has a header with grommets or if it's a sleeved flag, you roll from the fly end towards the hoist so that you don't have the heavier material and or the metal pieces, those kinds of things, crushed up against the tube and the flag itself, causing more damage. Okay, now what do you do once you roll it on the tube? Because the weight of the flag itself plus the tube, if it's sitting flat on something, you're going to crush the flag, okay, the textile itself. So you put it on a cradle, the tube that is. Your tube needs to extend beyond your flag, and that allows you to what we use ethafoam. It's, again, a archival material, just like styrofoam blocks, and you carve cradles, just U-shaped pieces that can either fit in a drawer or on a shelf. You can stack them just like you see in the picture, and once your flag is rolled onto the tube, again using tissue, you want to cover it with either, believe it or not, Tyvek. Same kind of stuff that you see people put on the sides of their houses when they put their insulation on. Similar very much to that. It's made by the same company. And or unbleached muslin to cover your flag on the tube when it's sitting on the cradle to keep anything that might drift on top of it, like dust or what have you. Believe it or not, one very important thing is, regardless of what you roll your flag in as an outer covering, you're always going to have that lip, the end of the sheet of material. You want that end of the sheet pointing down, because if anything drips from above, if you have a pipe break or a leak in your roof or anything that settles like dust, you don't want it caught by that open end of things and then get down into your rolled flag. Okay, this is an example of your medium to small flags. If you have to roll them, if you need to fold them, you want to create something I'll show you here that we typically call a sausage or a paper tube that is crinkled on the ends to give it some support, so that so you have to fold the flag in half. Anytime you fold the textile, you're creating stress on those fibers, so you need to give that fold some support, and you put a paper sausage where that fold is, so that the stress on those fibers are evenly distributed around that curve, instead of something that gets worse over time when your flag is folded. That's typically where your flag will start to break. Okay, not to mention, you do it long enough, no matter how much you iron, no matter how much you get it wet or what have you, and try to steam it, eventually those folds will become permanent, and you won't be able to get those out of the textile that the flag's made out of. Okay. And then again, as I mentioned, if you're going to roll it, you need to support it. And again, there's the ethafoam blocks that you'll cut to fit whatever size tube you've decided to use. Okay. Okay, something I've called the formidable four. Your flag's enemies, again, besides time, light, heat, and humidity. The best thing to do is to keep your flags in a dark and a consistent, controlled environment, like an interior room in your home, closet, that type of thing, something that does not have an exterior wall, like the walk-in closet in my house in the master bedroom has an exterior wall. In the summer, it's that side of the house faces the east, and so we get the beating sun of the rising sun that is, and that changes significantly the temperature in that closet. So I don't store flags in there. But definitely, even your daily use ones, definitely don't recommend a garage or an outdoor shed or those kind of things, because over time you'd be surprised how much damage can occur. And then a big one are pests. Okay, insects like moths and silverfish love your natural fibers, even the natural fibers of your headers. That maybe your polyester or your man-made fiber flags are made out of, those headers. They love to either eat them or set up residence. And if they live in your flags, even if they're not eating your flags, guess what happens to what they eat? Well, what goes in one end has to come out the other end. They're doing all of their business in your flags, okay? And that damages your textiles and stains them and can actually rot the textile. So pest-free locations, whether you treat, use traps, those kind of things, again, very important to extend the life of your textile and your flag. Here's some examples. You can see here, this occurred because of improper temperature and light discipline when storing and displaying the flag. I believe this is a form of silk. Okay. I don't know what weight or what it was treated with, if it was treated at all. You can see how this one got caught with some water, whether I think this one was through use. I don't think this was through storage or display, but it might have been. But you can see the water stained the edge of it when it got wet. And then this is a result of moths and the damage it can cause to a flag. You can see here how that's portion of the flag. You can see the header, and that's where two pieces of the flag came together, and the moths ate the top layer, the blue layer of the flag. Okay, and that damage can happen in your lifetime. Okay, that damage can actually happen in much less time than your lifetime. For almost 10 years now, I've worked in the museum system, kind of my side gig or what have you, and during a 20-year period, during some exhibition moves, some exhibit moves, we found textiles that had been in an interior room away from direct sunlight, and because that textile had a single fold, when we moved the exhibition and moved that textile to put it back in storage, there were already two different colors on the textile. And that was just over a period of 10 years. We've had textiles, flags in particular, that were literally balled up, wrapped with the cords, the line that was attached, they were naval flags, to the headers, and they used that to secure the balled up rolled flag and stuff it in boxes. We, to this day, can't get those folds out. They were probably that way for close to 15, 20 years. So there, all kinds of damage can happen in a very short period of time. Okay. So again, time, light, heat, humidity, and pests are not your friend. Always, if at all possible, store your flags flat whenever possible. If not, rolled. And I'll show you some examples of painted flags. If you have flags that are appliqued, have any kind of paint on them for the design, or have anything attached to the flag, rolling it is the worst thing you can do. Or folding it on those things is the worst you can do. Rolled is the next worst thing because you're stressing those parts. And once that paint comes off, depending on just how bad it is, it's virtually impossible to reapply those things and make it original again. So space and funding will likely determine what storage options you have. It'll require balance, but as I mentioned at the beginning, really the question you need to answer is just how much time, how long do you want your flags to survive? So I'm going to move over here real quick. These are examples of unbuffered tissue. You'll notice that it feels, looks, all that kind of thing, like the tissue you get in, at Christmas when you open it up and you get that ugly sweater from your aunt that you can't stand. It's like the tissue that comes in the box. Okay. So there can be confusion. All I can tell you is if you don't specifically buy unbuffered tissue, you're probably just getting regular tissue that if you wrap your flag in that, it off-gasses and it can actually discolor your flag, if not actually begin to destroy the textiles that make up your flag. Okay, so be very careful with that.
Yeah, where can you buy these archival products?
Believe it or not, well, Steve just asked, where can you buy these archival materials? There are very well-established we call them providers, or manufacturers that, or folks that just sell from manufacturers online. Uline, believe it or not, has some or has had in the past. There's a company called University that you can see a wide range of storage materials and supplies on. And if you give me a second, there's a third. I can't recall.
Hollinger Metal Edge.
Beg pardon?
Hollinger.
Yeah, Hollinger Metal Edge. There you go. I'm on their notification list for different things. But yes, thank you, Ted.
Available on Amazon too.
You can. Again, just make sure you know what you're clicking on, okay? Because tissue is not tissue, tubes are not tubes, board is not board. So just pay attention. It's actually called blue board. It's unbuffered tissue. The blue tubes are called blue tubes. So it's not real technical, not real difficult to deal with. Blue tube, regular tube, big difference. This is epiphone. This is the stuff I told you about that we typically carve the cradles out of. It looks, feels, smells sort of just like regular foam. It isn't. It's made out of, again, archival materials, typically made. I would send this around, but this is just basically Tyvek. If you're going to use it to wrap your flag that's rolled on a tube, you want to make sure that the slick side of the Tyvek, because the Tyvek has a kind of rough side and a slicker, flatter side. Don't be whacking each other with those tubes. I have a son, I know. But you want to make sure that that slick or that flat side of the Tyvek is what you're actually wrapping in contact with, hopefully, the tissue that you wrap your flag in when it's on the tube. Okay. So if you want to, you can come up and see it's just regular Tyvek. Like I said, it's very similar to the stuff you'll see people siding their house with, holding in the insulation, before they put the siding on. Essentially this.
What was this called again?
What, this here? Oh, epiphone. Epiphone. Shoot, what did I do with that? Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. At the foam right there. At the bottom. As I mentioned, if you're going to fold your flag, we make what we call tissue sausages. You know, Gwen's probably online. I don't know if I'm making her cringe or not. But you can see I just did this with the end, at the end of an extra flag staff. We have dowels of various sizes, so depending on how big the item is, what kind of sausage you need to choose how big you make it. Yes?
I keep most of my flags folded in boxes or bags they came in, and most of them are in a room in the house that it's not lit up much from outside. And I also have my house sprayed periodically by exterminators, not just to protect the flags, but protect everything in the house and insects.
Okay.
So you think I'm storing my flags all right?
Well, it depends on how long you want them to last. In my opinion, the worst thing you can do with your flag is to keep it in the plastic bag that it came in. Because that plastic bag, if it's sealed, provides a sealed environment that any kind of moisture or anything that got in that bag before it was sealed is now stuck with your flag and can start to make it deteriorate. Particularly if the temperature changes, if there's any kind of humidity, any kind of moisture in the air that got trapped in that bag, it starts to grow mold. It can, depending on how much oxygen is left in that air. So I mean, there's all kinds of bad things, in my opinion, to keeping your flags in the plastic bags that it came in. It's almost better to keep them folded in the box they came in than it is to have them folded in the plastic bag in the box. So at minimum, I'd say take them out of the plastic bag. If you can't cover them with tissue, at least get rid of the plastic bag.
Dan, a quick question that I and Scott Manning were in the chat have. We may well be channeling our late friend John Hood in the Portland Flag Association. Another way to store flags, not archival historic flags, but just regular flags, is hang them.
Yes.
What if John had a system with skirt hangers, and he would hang them? Obviously, if it's a silk flag, you don't want the weight, but with just a regular flag, how is hanging in your priority setting?
My daily use flags, I hang. I've got a wall, I've got pegs, I keep them in order, I know what they are, and that's how, but I don't expect those flags to last. You know, they're going to be consumed, and eventually I'm going to have to destroy them because they won't be a source. So for those kinds of things, absolutely. If they're flags that you want to last for a long time, hanging them is very bad because you're creating, regardless, wherever you hang that flag from, even if it's through a sleeve of the flag on a pole, you're creating stress along that piece that the sleeve is attached to, and just the natural weight of the flag over time starts stretching the fibers that make up the textile that your flag is constructed from. Now, granted, that takes time, but I've seen it happen in less than a lifetime. So, again, it just depends on how long you want your flag to last. But there's arguments to say if I got a daily use flag and you get the shoe thing that oftentimes you find at a store you can put on the back of your door of your closet and stick your shoes in. I know people that roll up their flag, put a piece of string around it and stick them in there. They label that, they know which one they want because that's their daily use, and they're not. It's not something you want to pass on to your great grandchildren or something like that. It's meant to choose. If you do want to pass on, I wouldn't do that. Emerald, so I'm going to go to the back of the room real quick. Yes?
You mentioned my question is labeling. How do you label this without causing anything?
Gotcha. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me answer that in conjunction with what I'm going to end with. This paper tube that I was talking about, the sausage, when you make one, I recommend folding the edges that are going to end up being the end of the tube, because over time, even a small flag will start to crush the tube, and that fold is going to end up getting more and more to feel like a fold instead of a roll. And what we do is that folded over edge allows you to crimp the end of your tube, your sausage, and it gives it a bit more rigidity without making it hard. And so when you fold in the end of your tube in on itself, it helps the sausage maintain its shape so that it takes longer for that collapse to happen. And nothing is forever. Even unbuffered tissue, even glue board and glue tube and all that will eventually deteriorate. So even in the museum world, you're supposed to have a cycle that you go through to replace all of that in your collection, because over time things still happen. To get to your question specifically, let me finish real quick with this. When you're either folding, rolling, even when it's laying out flat, for example, a grommeted flag like this, I'm using the flag of my wife's tribe. I'm trying to get brownie points with the wife, so help me out here. Okay. Put with unbleached twine, a string from here, just loop it through, don't tie it. Loop it through and tie it onto a piece of, hopefully, archival card. And that's what you write your description, whatever it is you think you need to know what that flag is, so that when it's rolled, and I'll just use this. Pretend there's a flag in here and there's a tube in here. What's sticking out the end is that tag. Okay? Again, what you want to do is handle your flag as little, if at all, possible. Okay? And one way to do that is to have it labeled, marked, so that you don't have to unroll it, lift up the tissue or the unbleached cotton or what have you to figure out what it is. Because the more you handle it over time, it's just going to help deteriorate the condition of your flag. So very good question. There's ways to do it like a tag that is not physically attached. Please don't staple a tag to your flag. Oh, this is a daily use thing and you don't care. But staples, regardless of what they're made from, eventually corrode or rust or what have you. They're just bad. Okay, so anything permanently attached to your flag is just something to avoid. Yes?
So how long is the cycle with all these materials?
It depends on what you use. It can be decades. You just have to, depending on who manufactured it and what it is, typically there's lifespan stuff that you can get from the manufacturer that helps you put your plan in place. Often it's not within the career of the person that put it in.
I actually have a question. Say someone inherited a flag that has been folded for so long, those creases are there.
Mm-hmm.
To store this flag, it is a very thin, rather delicate flag. Would it be best to keep it in its original folded storage position, or to get it into one of those rolls as quickly as possible?
If it's not very big, and you feel that it's, of course, the stat answer is take it to a conservator. Okay? But who can afford nowadays to go to a conservator if you're not, if you're a private person? So if you feel comfortable handling the flag, and again, depending on what type of flag you have, at least wash your hands. You'd be surprised, even if you use bare hands, as long as you wash your hands, it's safe to handle your textiles. If you use gloves, I personally use rubber gloves. I don't use cloth gloves when handling textiles or flags, because it's very easy for a seam or a loose thread or whatever to get caught in the cotton. And so I don't use cotton gloves when handling things like this. But if you're comfortable handling the flag, wash your hands. If at all possible, open the flag very carefully and store it as long as you possibly can. Open flat. That will help relax the fibers. Eventually, over time, hopefully much of the folds will go away. And then we can talk later. Anything beyond that, you're taking risk. It is possible to help get rid of folds, but that involves oftentimes introducing moisture, pressure over time, those kind of things to flatten stuff out. And that's into the conservation piece. that if I try to talk more about it, Wayne will probably come to me. Let's not do that. But yeah, at least if it's at all possible to open it up, just like I did with this, on some kind of a tissue barrier, like on buffer tissue, on some kind of flat piece that you can source with. Yes, sir.
Did Gwen comment on this already?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if she can hear me. Is she still online?
She's on, there's been radio silence from the flag.
If you notice, I made one before. It's very long, very skinny, because if you have a flag like this that you want to store folded, that's where you would put the sausage, is at the fold. If it's at all possible, there's a way that you can have a support on each side that you can put glue board across so that the flag doesn't have this dip, and that board would hold it the same height as your sausage so that it's one continuous loop and it's not down, because what ends up happening over time is where the flag comes down off of this sausage, one becomes a fold. And again, these are the far end of taking care of your flags. I know the vast majority of people will probably have flags that they either use daily, they're not necessarily worried about leaving it to their great grandchildren. Yes.
There's actually a comment and a question in online, not from Gwen. But one comment is, one labeling exception I would recommend is for internment flags. This is from Nicholas Artemovich. Please forgive me. I see so many anonymous casket flags for sale on eBay that I recommend the relatives write the name and dates of service of their beloved on the heading of the flag itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's something else to talk about, I think. And Nick, I don't know if you can hear me, but great input. This is my personal opinion, okay? Not that it's necessarily shared by professionals in the museum, conservators, etc. But if you're the owner of that flag, meaning like if my father passed away and they handed me his flag, I don't see anything wrong with ensuring the provenance of that flag by marking the header just like Nick did. Okay? It's not something that, the flag ended up in a estate sale and, Bill, bought it and then he passed it on to, whomever in here, and then you mark it. That I have a problem. Because unless you have a chain of custody and letters, blah, blah, all those kind of things, to me it doesn't make sense. But yes, I've seen those as well. And that brings up another good point. If you have one of those flags like I do, the worst thing you could do to it is to leave it in that case, in my opinion. Okay. Now that's a conservation textile guy talking. But if you're talking about your son, keeping it that way because that's the way it was given to your son, your daughter, wife, or what have you, and that's the way it's going to stay. I have one of those, and it's still in there. It's personal choice, how long you want the flag to exist, what you think is going to happen to it down the road. All those kind of things can be determined by the store. Yes.
Don't leave flag in a brown paper bag. I saw a beautiful bear flag with huge brown spots and all four quarters that have been sitting in a brown paper bag for probably 20 years.
And because brown paper bags are often meant to be one use, high acidic content, all kinds of bad things in the fibers in the production process, acidic and all that kind of jazz. And it doesn't take long, believe it or not, it doesn't have to be years for that stuff to start damaging your flag.
Another question just came through. If you wave a flag 24/7, how long will it survive?
Yeah. So many forces involved. It depends on how bright your sun is. Like something here in St. Augustine probably won't last the same as someplace else that the sun isn't as harsh or as long, year round, that kind of thing. Weather, wind,
Humidity.
it depends. I've had flags outside my home 24/7 that didn't last 3 months. So that had to last longer. Yes.
Shell casings and interment flags, have you seen that?
Oh, yes, yes.
Did you fish them out? Is it?
Okay.
I put them in military funerals.
Yeah, so have I.
I've never considered something that would damage the flag or someone would later come and pull it out.
It's very, very bad for the flag. If it is the actual casings that were fired, all of that you get chemicals from the smokeless powder, those kind of things that are in there. Even the primer, the stuff that's left, very, very bad if it's inside the case. Because just like that plastic bag, you just put your flag in a micro environment full of all kinds of bad things that over time will typically internment flags are the type that are grummeted, they're not sleeved. So that'll start working its way through the textile to those metal pieces and start corroding, rusting, or what have you that, as well as damaging the actual fibers in the textile. Okay.
So I think we have time for one more question here. Are cedar blocks useful to help ward off moths?
Not in conservation. It is, again, if you have cloth flags, because they're not going to bother your polyester flags. Your polyester flags with cotton or some type of natural fiber header, it might help for that. If it's a daily use flag, if it's maybe your medium lifetime flag that you want to keep for a while, there's nothing I don't think that's wrong with that. But if you want your flag to exist beyond you, don't use cedar blocks. Here's some examples of flags that have painted elements with different fabric weights. These are the type of flags that you don't want to fold. You don't want to roll if at all possible. And if you do, you want to fold wherever there is not a appliqué piece of the design or a painted piece or any of that, because that's just going to make it worse. Yes?
Yeah. Interesting, we're talking about the painted flags and not rolling or folding. It reminds me, and not many of us have painted flags, but some of us do have silk flags.
Yes.
And the very first NAVA meeting I ever went to, Vexillological Cooper, who was the curator of textiles, was talking about silk flags.
Yes.
And she absolutely said, you may not fold, you may not roll.
Yes.
Silk has a life of 70 to 85 years. You can extend it by 30, 50 years. And her technique was, you just take it sort of with a lump and loose, and just store it in new mail sacks, which would be similar to using the unbleached muslin.
There you go.
And took them out every 6 years, and every 6 months, and let them flop back down again, so to change whatever stresses there might be.
That keeps the folds from becoming permanent. Yes.
Creases, yeah.
Creases. And that's something, Jack, to mention. A lot of people talk about, I've got silk flags. You hear all the time about archaeological digs, and they find these silk, garments or whatever that are, 2,000 and 3,000 years old. Well, that's because they've been in a controlled microbiome environment, in a constant temperature setting, in the dark. Nobody's touched them, that kind of thing. And so silk can't. But it's one of the worst things you can make a flag from because it's so delicate and just flags. Anyway, I'll be here for a little while longer if you want. I do have examples of blue boxes, and if you have your flags small enough, these things do come in big sizes. There's different ways to store them in these types of boxes. And I do have examples of what knife we use to cut methafoam and the cotton twill that you probably saw in the pictures here that tie the Tyvek onto the walls. So whatever you'd like to talk about, if you want to take the time, I'll be here for a little bit. Sorry I went over.